Hello and welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. So I am so excited about my guest today. This is Dr. Stephen James. He is a partner of mine on my journey and on my health journey. He's someone who I deeply admire, deeply respect. You're part of my inner dream team. I call it my dream team, the team that keeps me healthy and happy and alive and well in the world. And you're one of my favorite people because whenever I have clients who come to me who have these really weird problems and I have no idea how they're going to get solved, I pass them to you. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I think wasn't I the first doctor to use your product? You know,
yes.
That was a good choice.
Yeah, it created this long-standing friendship, 7 years now.
That's true.
7 to 8 years. So welcome. I'm so excited for our listeners today to understand a little bit more about you, what you do, some of those really unique patient stories. You know, the goal of this podcast is to highlight all the different types of practitioners that exist out there for our health, but also within the different professions, there are such variabilities in terms of who you're talking to, what they specialize in, and your approach to health. So will you share a little bit about your background and what got you into chiropractic medicine? Because I think you're really a jack of all trades. You come to this, but you bring so many modalities together. And that's what makes your approach to healing people on the table very unique.
Yeah, well, I guess it started when I was out of high school. I went to college for a couple of years and decided to go in the Army. As an Army, I trained as a behavioral science specialist and as a medic. Okay. I ended up being a flight medic, and I also was a clinical specialist. And so I got quite an exposure when you're in the jungle and you're carrying a bag, and I was basically playing doctor, minor surgeries, antibiotics, steroids, whatever people needed. So I got a baseline there. When I got out, I challenged half of the paramedic exam and became a firefighter paramedic, so I started doing emergency type medicine, and I had an old chiro that helped me with a shoulder problem that I had, and he would touch me here and I would feel it over there, and I was just fascinated. So I started to train with him a little bit, and between that and martial arts, because I've been a martial artist my whole life, I got very interested in acupuncture and different kinds of point therapy, if you please, and became a massage therapist body worker. And I call myself a master body worker. I'm probably more of a master of that than I am at martial arts, and I'm a 7th degree black belt. So I think I'm probably better at the clinical stuff.
Sure.
So that was kind of the start. I went to chiropractic school, and after chiropractic school, I studied acupuncture, and then did a diplomate in functional neurology. So was trained in that for an additional 400 hours postdoctorate. But the real key to what you're talking about is some of the people I got to train with.
Sure.
I had a dental mentor who was my mentor for 30 years, and he taught me a lot about dentistry. He was brilliant at temporal mandibular joint and other things. And he introduced me to Dr. Travell, who was President Kennedy's physician. Well, Kennedy, Johnson, Eisenhower, Nixon. And she was doctor for 4 presidents. And she wrote the book on myofascial pain and dysfunction. So I found out that I was pretty proficient at doing manual therapy and doing what we call trigger point work and other types of work. And there's a continuum, a myriad of different types of body work. So another one was craniosacral therapy. So I trained with Dr. Upledger, who created craniosacral therapy. He was actually in Palm Beach Gardens, which is where I grew up. And didn't even know he was there until I was 27, and trained with him. That was 40 years ago, actually. I'm 67 now. So, so I trained with Dr. Upledger, and I did other work too, Vater technique, manual lymphatic drainage, trained in visceral work, which I don't think a lot of chiros do cranial and visceral work, and it's pretty powerful, really, as you've experienced.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a myriad of different ways of looking at the body and healthcare, and it was a convoluted path, but it was effective, at least in more complicated cases. So
sure. It really was a convoluted path, but isn't that the beauty? Sometimes we have these weird convoluted life paths that lead us to exactly what we do now, and we only can recognize it when we look back.
It's true.
Even for myself, I'm like, why? People ask me sometimes, like, why do you sell turmeric all day? I'm like, I don't sell turmeric. I have finally discovered the one thing that holds my immune system intact and lets me live a normal life. I'm just trying to share it with you people because it took me forever to find this thing. I went on my own convoluted path. So in your case, I mean, you are talking about functional neurology, fused with myofascial work, fused with dentistry. And we're talking about like jaw, how you dig into the jaw and talk so much about jaw and feet and our translation with our mouth, craniosacral, acupuncture, body worker, Vader technique, and manual lymphatic drainage. So when I wrote all that list down just now, I thought, you know, he's a detective. When you get to his room on his table, he sits you down and says, let's actually figure out what's really going on here. And that's why I fell in love with your work, because it wasn't just, hey, let me just give you an adjustment. This is your well check and keep moving. It's a much bigger, deeper detective work. And when you work on someone, I find there's like the superficial layer where you have to kind of we always talk about putting the fires out. Because I normally roll into your office like, I'm locked. I lifted too heavy for the 80th time. Can you help me? Versus walking in saying, hey, I know I need to be better. Can you please just put things back into alignment? So will you share a little bit about how you approach what you do with your patients kind of from that mindset of bringing all this together?
Okay. Well, first let me say that I don't dig into people's mouth. I touch into people's mouth. People think I'm digging all the time.
It feels like digging.
Everybody, I'm just touching. They're going, right, sure, because it's not about, massage therapists want to rub things out. Chiros want to bang things out. It's just about touching people the right way. And I think I mentioned to you before, one of my professors said that it was the most biblical type of healthcare because, the laying on of hands, which chiro means hand, to practice with your hand is chiropractic. So laying on of hands is one of the oldest healing arts, as you know, from Ayurveda as well. So,
sure.
So, and Vader technique is manual lymph drainage. So those are Emil Vader created that particular brand of lymph drainage.
Nice.
But I guess, when Dr. Leibel introduced me to Dr. Travell, she brought me an article the second time I was with her, and it was called The Mysteries in the History. Okay, and it's a great article. And basically, she said, Stephen, if you listen to patients, they'll tell you what's wrong with them. You just have to listen. And unfortunately, our healthcare system kind of drives you to where people want to get numbers, and the insurance companies reimburse less and less, and docs are more and more stressed. I know your husband and your brother-in-law are just flat out all day long. You know? So most of us would like to take more time than we do. I have the luxury of taking as much time as I want because I don't work for anybody else. But really taking the time and first to figure out what the problem is. A lot of people are just throwing stuff against the wall and hoping something sticks. So to really know what's going on is important. And like you said, not only putting out fires, but peeling the onion, so to speak, going deeper and deeper and deeper, not so much physically deeper, but, people's bodies change, and you have to watch how their body responds. When you touch somebody and they move a certain way, well, they could have moved this way or they could have moved that way. So you have to be able to read what's going on with their body and respond to that. And you asked me another question. I don't know what you asked me.
I mean, it's interesting because you have to be a detective, and you're right. Modern medicine is not really allowing most doctors or practitioners to have the time that they need to dive into our health issues. And that's a frustration. And I think it's common, and everyone knows I try to be very balanced in my viewpoints around Western and Eastern medicine. But where you're unique is you're probably one of the very few practitioners who you will take your time. You'll take an hour and a half on that initial consultation. You'll take the x-rays. You're going to ask a full history, but you're going to really try to ascertain what are the key root cause issues that are driving the problem. Like when I first came to you, I said, my neck hurts all the time. And I just moved. I had moved at that time into my house. And I thought it was from moving, from lifting heavy boxes. But previous to that, I had been a CrossFitter. Previous to that, I had had a horrible car accident. It never would have occurred to me my problem was the car accident. I would have assumed forever, I just lifted too heavy. So I was trying hot showers. I was trying massage. Nothing was working until we took an x-ray. We didn't see, hey, you have a military neck. You have some other issue. I can't remember with the weird bones I have that no one else has right there. And you met me and you were like, I'm surprised you're even this functional for what you've got going on underneath the hood that no one has talked to you about. And we have this lifelong journey we get to have together where you get to work on me to keep me pain-free. So, speaking for a moment just into the force of car accidents and or the root causes that people have that they just have no idea about, I'd love for you to share and illuminate a little bit on it, because also one big thing you've taught me is if our body's forever kind of twisted in the ribs, if we have this, seatbelt injury, we're forever going to be in our sympathetic nervous system. We're going to be in fight or flight and never be like the relaxed, calm, balanced, aligned human that we want to be. And how sad is that?
Well, first, people don't realize that things don't go away. Yeah. When our body goes through a series of decompensation, compensation. Okay. The two stories that pop in my head that relate to what you're talking about. When I stopped riding rescue, I went to work for Institute of Sports Medicine, and with a bunch of PTs that I knew, and they started giving me the tough cases, and at that time I was a massage therapist, body worker, and one guy they had a plane crash and broke his neck, and he couldn't move his neck, and nobody could figure it out, and they were all giving me history and examine. I'm going, wait a minute. Take a step back, take a fresh look. And this guy was just like this. So I said, does this hurt? Have you got a jaw problem? And, no, do what the PTs told you to do. And I'm going, well, hey, that doesn't hurt, does it? And the guy's levitating off the table. Sure. Well, what they forgot to ask and what he forgot to tell him is a few years before his plane crash, a boat had, propeller had actually projected a piece of wood and hit him right in teeth. He says it took 4 dentists 3 days to put his mouth back together. Wow. So as soon as I turned off his jaw, all of a sudden his neck started moving. Okay. Sure. I had another lady, she was a dental hygienist. Her husband was a pilot, nice people. Had a lot of pilots and other dental people come to me from them. She was having headaches that, they were getting all kind of meds and everything. And I think she had done some PT and some other things. But what had happened is she'd had a car accident nobody asked about, and she got whacked in her head. So it's not uncommon for people to say, well, you got little teeny holes in your head where the cranial nerves come out. And one of the main ones is the jugular foramen, a little hole between these bones right here. And or from the side right here behind between the temporal bone and the base of the skull. And, once I corrected that, headaches went away. Wow. And it can affect shoulder, the whole side of the body. So it can be a subtle thing that most people just don't pay attention to. Sure. And so, but a lot of times it's a series of events that have happened. And like I said, you're peeling the onion. You're going back and finding stuff that set up certain patterns that you've got to get to have success. Sure. So it takes time.
And that's a big deal. This is the whole point of the podcast. I get to talk to you and learn so much. And I have over these last 7-8 years together. No one else would get to hear our conversations. And we talk about some pretty cool stuff.
We do.
So for someone to walk in with headaches and they're taking their, drugs for it to get out of the pain, they've probably tried different modalities, but a simple adjustment fixed the problem. Not that it's simple. It's, the artist and the scientist and the person that you are coming together with the knowledge base that helps you quickly ascertain what the real issue is. Are there other examples like that of issues? Because what I can imagine is anybody who's suffering with hormonal imbalances, headaches, migraines, gut issues, anything musculoskeletal, any joint pain anywhere in the body could come to you. And then you could help them unravel, okay, well, it was event A, then it was event B. Now it's event C that you're thinking is really the trigger. But really, if you unpack it backwards, let's go fix what was the problem from event A. And now you're just solved is probably a strong word for it, but you're healed for this period until something else comes up, right?
You know, sometimes symptoms come from nowhere, and they don't seem to relate to things that people have going on. But we all started, it's two cells, okay? So what I tell people is all the cells in the body have to either be kissing cousins or distant cousins, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I was reading part of a book the other day that talked about hiatal hernia, which a lot of people have, you know, and I've started to do more visceral work since I started to teach with a doctor named Dale Alexander, who taught for Upledger, and he's heavy into visceral work. And what we're finding out is as we do visceral work, for example, you not only correct their GI tract, you correct back pain, you correct headaches, panic attacks, TM joint. And the book that I was reading, this doctor mentions that that he's had people with temporomandibular joint problems that get better from doing visceral work. You know, that being said, what I learned from Dr. Travell and the people I train with is most dentists aren't trained in that, you know.
Sure.
The guys that do it are, you know, are pretty pricey, and some of them are real good, and some of them, you know, may be good academically, but are you good practically? You know, there's a lot of smart doctors out there that, you know, may not have the best hands, whether you're a chiro or a dentist or whatever flavor of physician you are, you know. So you know, to find those people, and like you say, your dream team.
Yeah.
I have a dream team of doctors around me that I refer to, that I know personally, that I've either had treat me or know them by reputation.
Sure.
Because it's really important for me. I can't treat everybody for everything, but if there's a component that I need to farm out for somebody to handle, it's good to have those people that are really, you know, excellent to do that. You know, people are under so much stress these days.
Yeah.
You know, and part of our stress is like you say, our fight and flight. You know.
Yeah.
And you mentioned ribs. I've taught on thorax recently, and it's being well received. People have a lot of pain, and the name of the course is the Thorax Uncharted Territory, because nobody looks at thorax.
Sure.
You know? And yet, you know from experience, if I just touch your ribs, you're levitating off the table some of the time, and you're not trying to hurt anybody, but there's just a lot there. Anything you feel has to get to your brain.
Right.
You know, if you're paraplegic or quadriplegic, you can stick a knife in your leg, you won't feel it. But there's all kinds of stuff firing on our brain, and your brain and your nervous system does a pretty good job filtering that and you know, mitigating that. But sometimes it just becomes overwhelming. And when people are in pain or they're stressed out, they start pumping chemicals that mess with their gut. And,
Correct.
And then your gut's actually called the second brain. So now you got gut-brain issues. You see what I'm saying? There's actually a book by that title, The Second Brain. So you know, the information's out there. You know, we all, as we go through history, we build paradigms. We build these constructs of how we think the body works.
Sure.
And every few years we realize we didn't have a clue. You know,
It's true.
I remember when they've changed CPR, they changed ACLS, they've changed all these things. Advanced cardiac life support. All these things have changed as we've gone on. Well, we thought we were doing it right, but we really weren't. You know, and then they'll go back and kind of do a reset. You know, and so you've got to be willing to take a step back and say, okay, does this really make sense? Is this really working, or is this the whole story? You know,
Sure.
And usually it's not. You know,
and that's a powerful thought right there. We do evolve and change our approach to medicine over time, and so as an Ayurvedic practitioner, my job has been to dive deep. Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old science. I happen to be married into and related to a lot of people who are part of the Western allopathic medicine construct. Like you said, these are all paradigms and constructs. Not here to judge, but I do find it a little irritating sometimes when certain systems of medicine think that they are the only way, the only right way, and their system's 100% infallible. And where that really angered me was when I took a hypnobirthing class. And there's this book I think every woman should read called Hypnobirthing. But in the beginning, it explained how childbirth was treated in the 50s and 60s. And they were like, yep, we believed we were right. We carted those women in. We strapped them to their hospital beds. We gassed them. And then the baby came out. We used suction and cones and these things. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? You have erased all of ancient wisdom, all of intuition, all of a woman's body, self-knowledge of her own body and what works. And you've decided that through modern constructs, this is correct. And then later you're like, oops, sorry, I changed my mind. I was wrong. Now I'm going to change it again. And so whatever's happening right now in the 2000s, when it comes to childbirth in the Western medical construct, I just laugh because I know it's going to have to swing back. There's no way we can deal with female mortality issues in childbirth at this rate in this country and not eventually say, oh yeah, maybe we're doing it a little wrong. So can you speak a little bit into that? Because these are the types of fun conversations you and I get to have where I'm always like, what the F? And you're like, Shwani, it's going to be okay. But I get really angry that we think we're so right.
Well, you know my son. I have a very attractive, smart 15-year-old who happened to have been a forceps delivery, which is a craniopath's nightmare. Craniopath is someone who does cranial work, okay? And I, when he was born, I induced labor with acupuncture. My ex went into labor in 15 minutes. Doc didn't show up for about 5.5 hours, so he sat in the birth canal getting his head crushed. And when he went to delivering, he said, oh, his head's right there, I can snatch him out, and pulled out a forceps set. And I said, I said manually, and he said, yeah. And he pulls out a forceps set, and I go, that's not manually, dude, that's forceps, And he got a little upset and ended up, having a forceps delivery, which was a nightmare. My head son was in the 97th percentile of deformity. And this was after, I think we fired like 4 pediatricians, Finally, one said to my ex when I wasn't there, well, if you're so worried about it, go see this guy, down in Lauderdale and do it. Well, long and short, when we got down there, after hours of waiting and seeing all these kids with helmets on and stuff, I'm talking to the occupational therapist, and I said, how much for a helmet? And this is like 15 years ago, And she goes, $27.50, and I'm like, really? Okay, well, insurance won't cover it, right? Unless you've got cranial bones that are jammed, and they call it synostosis, okay? But they were going to put the helm on my son, and she said, well, that includes our work, or my work. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, well, and I said, no, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. And she said, oh, a little myofascial work. And I said, well, forgive me, but I trained with Janet Travell, and I teach this stuff, and my ex was a massage therapist, or is a massage therapist. And so she said, well, I guess you'll be doing your own therapy. And I said, well, how much now? And she said, $27.50. So it didn't change a dime. So you begin to wonder if things are about getting people well or just about money. And I said, by the way, have you done any cranial training? And she said, oh, no, I haven't gotten to that yet. And I said, wow, excuse me, you just told me you've been doing this for 10 years and I see 50 kids in the waiting room. You've never bothered to take a cranial class? So this is the kind of thing that goes on in medicine. You and I know that, there are brilliant surgeons out there, but they got some guy that's from the implant, company, doing their measurements and calculations for them and guiding them and correcting them, So, people in medicine, of any flavor, it's not about you, it's about the patient. And so there's no need for any arrogance there. There's a lot of brilliant people that are very skilled, but it does take a team, and I can't do everything for everybody. And I need to know when I need to call somebody else or send somebody else to know, to get them what they need. And they may get what they need and come back, and then that helps me, But the main thing is helping the patient, and we don't have a patient-centered. First, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a disease care system. And secondly, it's not patient-based. It's economically based pretty much, and which is kind of sad but true.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. I have people around me who, their insurance won't cover any of the doctors they go to, and they're so frustrated. And I'm like, I intimately know and see all of the problems in medicine, and so it's frustrating because this is why I seek out practitioners who actually will help you, because not everyone can help you in the system they're in. So you really have to be so sovereign. You have to be an advocate for your own health. You have to go build your own dream team. You have to figure out what works for your individual body.
Right.
Each of our systems is different. You named like 8 different systems that you work in. That's amazing that you can be a jack of all trades and can pull from them. Most of the time, most of us have to run to acupuncture because we've got this problem going on, and chiro for that, and 18 other things on this deep dive into fixing ourselves, when we can come to you and you're like, well, actually, I think acupuncture will help you more for that today. And you're like, oh, okay, thank you. I can get it right here. That's amazing.
Right.
So it's very unique. And sometimes we have these conversations around, like, if medicine would just integrate all the modalities and fuse them, we would have such a different experience.
Well, there's a lot of territorialism going on there,
Sure.
and a lot of that's about money. Some of it's about ego.
Yeah.
Some of it's just because there's been attempts to integrate things. And I went to a pain management conference, recently, where they were talking about integration, and they've tried to integrate more than most of the disciplines. But what's interesting, you reminded me of a study that Upledger did back when he was at Michigan State. They got everybody together, and they said, somehow when this guy touches people, things change.
Right.
So they wanted to know why.
Sure.
And what they found out is just being in somebody's space and just putting your hands on someone, some people would touch you and you just don't feel right, or you don't feel right in their space.
Sure.
And then other people, you're very at ease. And if people don't feel at ease and they don't feel good in your space and they don't like your touch, then it's a no-go.
Sure.
They need to go see somebody else or do something else. But it's really important. There's that, and they actually said it was more of an energetic, energetic and probably certainly an emotional connection that made or tend to make any kind of therapeutic event more effective.
Sure. And in modern day times, we dive so far into science. Everything has to be scientifically proven, scientifically studied. Whenever I get into an argument with my husband around health topics, which does happen.
You mean discussion, right?
Discussion.
Yeah.
Totally discussions.
Yeah.
But when we get into these discussions around health, I usually leave the conversation. I say, you know what? Non-believers are just believers in the making. When we're 80, you'll see I was right the whole time. And that usually doesn't leave everything as happy, but it buffers a little so we can leave the conversation satisfied. But it's just interesting because I feel like there's been a reversal of trust in the healing capacity of the practitioner. It's almost like we're being commoditized. Like you see these places like the Joint Chiropractic, like these are boxes. People think of themselves as boxes and doors. And it's a forgetting of the power of the healer themselves. Like in my work, I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner. What is my job in a lifestyle consultation? Purely to intuitively ascertain with all the data you're giving me and presenting me, and with our own energetic exchange, what is the real problem? And it took me a long time of doing that work, 10 years now, to finally be like, this is your problem. This one thing is the issue. I'm going to say it, even though sometimes I don't want to say the truths that are screaming on my insides. And I hand that result to them, and then I get to direct from the Fusionary Dream Team or my own Dream Team which way they should go. And so it's just, that's what I always am reminded by when I talk to you, is the healer's duty is to actually be their purest and happiest and healthiest self and bring that to the patient experience, to the room, because otherwise we can't bring our best selves to the table, right? To heal.
First, I would say you can't give what you don't have.
Sure.
Okay. So you've got to be there to be able to deliver that. Secondly, I would say that none of us, I've had people call me healer, I've had people call me magician, whatever,
Yeah.
Whatever gifts I have, are just that. They're gifts. There's nothing to be arrogant about.
Sure.
I don't care if you're a surgeon, like your husband and your brother-in-law, or you're just a real good chiro, or an osteopath, or an Ayurvedic practitioner, you
Sure.
know, or acupuncturist physician, you know. So at best, quote, healers are conduits.
Yeah.
It's not them, you know. Only the Creator heals people, and our bodies are miraculous in that they heal themselves, and that's one of the main principles of chiropractic, is your body's a self-healing organism that will do its thing if you let it, you know.
Correct.
We're pushing a rock up a hill because there's been so many, 40,000 chemicals added to foods in the last 50 years, and we've got chemtrails, and we got contaminated water, and we have all kinds of stuff that we're battling. It seems like it's down to a science that people live about, 70 some years, and then they get to stop collecting, Social Security.
Sure. Sure.
But people, most of us are our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
You know, people, everybody pretty well knows what they should be doing lifestyle-wise, and I know a lot of our Ayurveda has to do with lifestyle.
Yeah.
As far as nutrition and exercise, and it's not just physical nutrition, getting buff in the gym. It's about mental health as well, and emotional health. And most people just don't either do the work, or take the time to do work, or have the time to do the work.
Sure.
You know? So sometimes look, you got to take time out. I had a person the other day who had lost a spouse about a year ago, and it became very apparent to me real quick that I needed to hear that story.
Sure.
Because this patient wanted to talk about that, and it was important. And it was important to me because this is a younger person, and there was a whole saga of frustrating medical situation. And some doctors who were very caring, some who were very arrogant and not at all empathetic. And how are you going to help someone if they're having this turmoil on an emotional level? So,
sure.
So this person needed to get that out, and yeah, it was a 20-minute discussion, or mostly me listening.
Sure.
But that's just as important to me as me moving a bone or putting an acupuncture needle in someone, or doing anything else.
Sure.
We're treating human beings, mind, body, and spirit. We're not just treating cases and people. And you find yourself, okay, I had a real interesting case the other day. And they're not really a case; they're a human.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to a fellow clinician, it's a case because you're thinking of the dynamic.
Sure.
But it's really human beings you're treating, and if you can't meet them where they are and as a human, then you're probably not going to be as effective as you could be.
Sure. And on that note, will you share that story about the patient who had the car accident, who got run over? You have certain stories that always leave an indelible mark on my brain.
Well, they leave an indelible mark on my brain because usually they teach me something that leads me in a direction.
Yeah.
This particular lady was shot through the face and shot through the back and run over 3 times by a car. She was in a parking lot, and somebody came up and killed her boyfriend, and then she was trying to get out of the car, and he shot her and ran her over 3 times. He had just gotten out of jail, and she did 1.5 years of rehab, and came in my office on a walker, and she was doing physical therapy at the time, but the physical therapy they were doing was just walking her on a treadmill, and the reason that was kind of remarkable is that if I went to push her foot up, dorsiflex her ankle, just bring your toe towards your head, she'd go in this clonic activity, and what's that about? In doctor speak, that would be an upper motor neuron lesion, and so how the hell am I going to get rid of this?
Yeah.
It was bizarre, and I had to take a fresh look. I stood back and looked at her x-rays, and there was real asymmetry in her thorax. I'm thinking, well, this lady got run over 3 times. You know, yes, you could see shrapnel through her face where they had to reconstruct her facial nerve, and so you see little pieces of metal through her face, and you can see a bullet still lodged in her back. Fortunately, not in the spine, but near the spine. They left that alone, but the thing that really messed her up was getting run over by a car 3 times.
Sure.
So why she had an audience in a Publix. But at any rate, when I took a look at that, so I started to treat her thorax. Again, I touch her, she's levitating off the table. But all of a sudden, this activity in the foot went away. I mean, what's that about? I had 2 prior examples. I treated a very famous tennis player many years ago who had a thoracic injury where a mirror hit him in the chest. He was driving his bike 27 miles an hour. A truck pulled out. The mirror hit him in the chest. And at that time, this is before I became a doctor, I was just working fire rescue, and when I made the transition to sports medicine, as a massage therapist, body worker, I'm like, dude, your thorax is totally whacked out. It's beyond my scope. Yeah. Not beyond my scope anymore. But so that happened, and my son's mother, when I met her, she had a car accident, and she made the observation. She was treating with an orthopedist and a chiro in the same office, and I said, well, how you doing? Because I didn't want to interfere. And,
sure.
And she said, well, my chest hurts, and they keep treating my back. Yeah. So I went and took a course with a physical therapist. It was a pretty good course, and took me down the path to learn how to treat thorax, and I tried to evolve it from there.
Sure.
And so it's just been remarkable how it's changed people. Unexpected, most everybody that walks in my door has some gait problems with their feet. So you go out and take 100 steps and you're back to square one if you don't fix it, Right. A lot of people sit all day long, and one side of their pelvis is a little smaller than each other, which is the first thing Dr. Travell said to me. Hand me my butt pad, Stephen. I thought she was nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you got a small pelvis on one side, your spine does this.
Sure.
Put a little something under your butt like I have under my butt right now. Your spine goes boom. It's simple.
Right.
Simple things confound the wise,
And that's why I think it's so important that people come in and see you and get an opportunity to understand what's actually going on. Sometimes it is as simple as orthotics. I wear custom orthotics. I have for years. Otherwise, my arches collapse, and then I can't exercise the way I want to. I know that I always sit more one side than the other. So is it as easy as just sitting on a magazine when I'm at my desk? Okay. Yeah. If that's going to make the body happier, why not do it? There's so many simple, inexpensive, easy ways to stay more balanced in our lives, but we have to know them to do them.
That's true.
And I mean, based on these examples you're giving, I kind of feel like everyone who's ever had a car accident needs to make sure that everything is working well and translating well inside of our bodies. Otherwise, we're going to live in this fight or flight mode. And you talked about the noise in the background. I sometimes get to a point where I'm like, you know what? You need to go see Dr. James. I can tell on my insides that I'm in this stressed out fight or flight mode that isn't like, you wouldn't sense it like, oh, she's freaking out right now, but more like I can tell as a mother, I'm not being my best. I can tell as an entrepreneur, I'm not being my best. Like I can feel this rise in baseline stress in the system. And we know that stress is a root cause of disease. We know stress is going to turn off our gut function. We're not going to rest and digest in the gut. We know that we're going to be burning our adrenals. We're burning the candles at both ends as it is. And so that's where I consider investing in coming in and seeing you as like your maintenance package for life. Kind of like I talk about cars all the time. You need to get the oil change.
Well, first, knowing you as long as I have and as well as I do, I don't know how you do what you do. To be wife and mother and entrepreneur and healer, all those things. So I don't know how you do it all. I have my son half-time, and I can barely handle that. So, and I'm not married. So I don't know how you do it. But Travell told me, she said something very simple and profound one day. She said, if you don't look for it, you're not going to find it, or you probably won't find it. So you really got to take the time to look and know what to look for.
Sure.
So, you've got to address it. I get people all the time that say, "Oh, I just had a little fender bender. It was nothing." And I'm going, about 10,000 joules of energy, or 100,000 joules of energy went through your body. We get tissue entropy. In other words, if energy goes into something, your tissue does this. Okay.
Sure.
It's like this is potential energy. That's kinetic energy, right?
Right.
So when your body torques and decompensates, and people don't construe they have a problem unless they have pain.
Correct.
But pain's a late symptom. Pain's your body saying, I'm not playing, pay attention, okay? But most people don't act until they feel pain or until they have dysfunction, okay? And that's really late in the ball game.
For sure.
So, and we all fell off our tricycle and fell out of trees and played sports and got injured and have had car accidents and all kinds of stuff. And your body decompensates and compensates and decompensates and compensates, Yeah. Then you get people that have a little fender bender, and they're like, God, I felt like I got hit by a truck, Well, you have a very fragile house of cards, and somebody flipped out your bottom card, and everything just collapses,
Sure.
And you're right about the fight or flight changes your whole physiology.
Yeah.
People don't really understand what stress is, right. And when we talk about the autonomic or automatic nervous system, we don't have to think to have a heartbeat or digestion and all these things or to breathe. That's the autopilot, if you please, the automatic nervous system that has two parts, fight and flight, and rest and relax or feed and breathe, depending how you want to say it. So craniosacral outflow is relax, take it easy, have a meal, and this is fight or flight. Your ribs are fight or flight. And
right.
So you want to put out the fires, as you alluded to, and you want to crank up that relaxed part of the nervous system. Now we have homeostasis. And when you're balanced and you're not like this all the time, like most people are, even if they're not showing it on the outside, okay, then everything works better. It's not rocket science. It's pretty simple.
Correct. And it's a big deal. I think we'd have a different society if we all learned how to drop into our rest and digest mode more. Yeah. But if our own body is fighting against us 100%, we're fighting a losing battle. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I looked at it and I was like, you have to go in. I know it takes time and you have to give off like an hour from work, but I'm sorry, this is your investment in your long-term health. You can't be in a stress mode all the time. And physiologically, you're in it no matter what you do. Then it doesn't matter how much you meditate. It doesn't matter how much you yoga. Mm-hmm. You're not counterbalancing it because physiologically, this is your baseline. So you have to do the work based on your own baseline, period.
Sure. Well, we have, look, if you think about the creation of mankind, okay, nobody's born with shoes on.
Correct.
Okay, people say, well, how come people have this one particular gait problem that I address? Well, I've never seen anybody born with shoes and socks on.
True. So true.
And we weren't born with, Wi-Fi and all the energy that we have going through our body.
Sure.
If people think that doesn't affect them, I've got news for them. We can have electrical pollution as well as any other types of pollution.
Correct.
So, there's ways to mitigate all this, and it's important. Most people don't even think about it.
I know.
Because they're just working to make it and
sure, working to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
All those things.
And but when, as you say, when you balance these things, all of a sudden your perspective changes and your life gets a little easier, and it's easier to negotiate all the stuff that life throws at us.
Correct.
Which it does.
Yeah. And you are building stress resilience. You're building a foundation. You're building a baseline from which you get to function. And that is preventive. That's preventive medicine. It's the whole point of what I try to teach is we have lifestyle choices we can make. But if I'm physiologically always going to be in fight or flight, I better do the work to work with my best practitioner to bring that all down a couple notches. And then all the work I do is that much more effective. And so speaking into kind of pain and inflammation, a lot of things we're talking about, I feel like I could talk to you all day here on the podcast, but I know that my time is running short. So one of my last questions I wanted to ask you was your thoughts on turmeric and your experience with Fusionary, because you are one of my favorite people to ask this question.
Well, I can tell you that I took my mother, who's going to be 87, bowling the other night. And I'm not a great bowler. I haven't bowled very often. I had a sleepless night. And And I said, okay, dummy. So I went and started loading up turmeric, and now I'm sleeping fine, you know. And I didn't do anything else. You know, all I did was load up on turmeric. And I used the inflammation product and slept great after that. 2 nights ago, I had a sleepless night because my shoulder was just killing me. And I injured it moving more recently.
Okay.
And it had been kind of calmed down until I started throwing a bowling ball around, and next thing you know, I have a sleepless night. So I didn't have to go take a bunch of drugs or anything. I went and loaded up on your product and slept fine. So because a lot of the cause of pain is inflammation. You know, the question is, why are things inflamed, either mechanically or chemically? And you know, there's a lot of questions to ask, but certainly as a nutritional, I mean, I had a doctor who, very, very wealthy, smart guy. We were having breakfast one day, and I told him, you know, all these herbs and stuff really work. And he goes, well, of course, that's why the drug companies are down the Amazon digging up herbs and stuff. And they take, unlike Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, they isolate the active ingredient and then synthesize things. So as soon as you say synthesize, you're not talking, you know, naturally made.
Correct.
My God. And by the way, people say, oh, that was natural. Well, so is arsenic and strychnine. So natural doesn't always mean that it's good either. But he said a very profound thing to me. He said, I know that it works because your bodies have receptors for it. Okay? So these different plants and herbs and things work because our bodies have receptors for it. That's the way God made it. Yeah, there's a reason why eating fruits and vegetables and different things are so important. Okay?
Sure.
Because they give us chemistry and energy that we wouldn't get otherwise. So, you know, we're made to be pretty natural beings, and as we evolve, you know, it looks like we're gonna have chips on our head pretty soon. You know?
I know.
So we're moving far away from what we were created to be. And sometimes the KISS principle works. Keep it simple, stupid. You know,
it's true. Yeah. It's true. And so, when you've given Fusionary to your patients, what kind of differences have you seen?
Oh, well, people love it, and you know, they don't have to go take ibuprofen and trash their gut, or Tylenol and trash their kidney, and it becomes a regime. You know, the turmeric gold is something I tell people you should take every day, just as part of your nutritional regime, and then, you know, keep things like the inflammation for when you have an event like I did, and it works. Works for me, works for my patients.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things. I was part of a turmeric biohackathon with a university recently in the last year, and they said, we just want to work with you because we are so shocked how many receptors in the body are available for curcumin. It doesn't make sense to us. We don't even understand why this thing, when it comes to our body, has so many receptors. And I said, well,
now,
I guess.
When you say curcumin, you're talking turmeric. About the portion of turmeric that,
yes. Yeah. And so it's just interesting when you look at it, you're right. Our body has receptors to all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can conclude on this happy point. Our body has receptors for plants, spices, herbs, fruit, vegetables, foods that Mother Earth has given us for eons and millennia. And here we are. I went to the Sprouts the other day and they had plums, but nothing was a plum. It was called like a plum quat, all these funny names. And I thought, I don't want your hybridized trademarked fruit. I actually just wanted the fruit. Could you possibly just give me the original fruit? Because maybe my body will recognize it as a plum, and it wasn't available. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not buying this product today. So why are we torturing our bodies with foreign ingredients that will not even be received as nutrition when we could, in fact, just give ourselves what the body wants and the body can be nourished and whole?
That's a good question. The short answer to that argument is that, and I've had that discussion with people, they'll say, well, the shelf life increases, or the color is better, or the texture is better. So that's one reason why people start messing with nature. Some people say, well, we're just getting ahead of nature because this happens naturally over time anyway, you know, evolutionary wise, because there is evolution within species, and even with bacteria, things mutate and change and develop. But I guess I think the more we stop playing God, the better off we'll be.
Absolutely.
Or trying to play God, the better off we'll be. So.
Well, I loved our discussion today here, Dr. James. You are one of my favorite people. You are one of those people where you're part of my personal dream team for my body. And then I always like all my amazing fusionary doctors to meet you because I want all the fusionary people out there, everyone who I meet, to know that you're there and that you're a resource. And you're right here in Boynton Beach, Florida. You are in South Florida. You're available to all of us down here who have any sort of health struggles or health issues. If they're looking for you, what is your website?
Actually, my website is being reconstructed.
Okay.
So, but I can give you my. I'll give people my cell number. I let people call my cell.
Okay. Whatever you want.
It's 561-319-4900.
Okay.
Yeah, we just brought in a nurse practitioner, and we're having a PT coming in probably.
Okay.
And neurological PT. So we're evolving. The nurse practitioner works with an osteopath who's a very nice, talented man. And she's a great nurse practitioner. And although we're separate entities, it's, again, more of a one-stop shop that people are able to get whatever they need. And I think we're going to bring in physical therapy as well and maybe some other things. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thank you for sharing about yourself, all the different ways you can help us with our health. And until next time, thank you. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.